Being able to execute code based on whether or not a condition is true and looping code either infinitely or stopping on a condition are among the most basic concepts in any programming language. Some of the most basic ways of going about this are if statements and loops. So if statements would be conditionals, and then loops would be loop, while, and for. So for would be iterative, while would be based on a condition, and loop would be infinite. We'll also go over one more sort of looping style block of code, a while let statement, which will loop based on some pattern match. Here we have the syntax for if statements in Rust. It's very similar to C, except we are missing the little parentheses that would go here if we were programming in C or C++. So we'll have the keyword if to begin the conditional, and then we'll have some block, which is a condition, meaning the code here will execute if this evaluates to true, and else meaning this evaluates to false. So everything else will result in this block of code being executed. And here we have the syntax for looping. Now, this is going to be a little bit more complicated and versatile than just if conditionals in Rust, but we'll have, similar to the if keyword, we'll have a for keyword, and then it'll go something like this. So we'll have an expression here, then we'll have in, and then we'll have a pattern here. So in this case, we're looping through numbers. We don't actually need these parentheses. But if we say for num in 1.11, that means we'll go from 1, execute some code with the num variable being equal to 1 first, and then go through 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 11. And this varies from language to language, but the inclusivity versus exclusivity of this number range is exclusive to 11. So we'll go from 1 until 10, and it'll print 10, but then it'll stop before it gets to 11. So it's basically saying, okay, we have a range from 1 to 11, but 11 is the maximum, so we won't actually execute code on that last number. Okay, so some other cool things we could do with a for loop like this with number ranges is, I'll just erase this real quick. We could have some variable. We can say let mute, meaning mutable. So it's just a keyword, meaning you have some variable that you'll be changing in the future. We'll say number equals 0. And then we could include right here, we'd have some line of code like number plus equals 1. And this way we won't just be printing our number every time. We can add some functionality and increment some mutable variable, a number in this case. So what will be going on is every iteration will increase the value of number by 1. So by the end, we will have done it 10 times and the value of number will be 1. If we wanted to do it in sort of a more incremental way, we could say number plus equals num. In this way, we'll increase the value of our number by an increasing amount. So first it'll be 1, then it'll be 2, 3, and so on. And we can do sort of a lot of cool things by iterating through either ranges of numbers like 1 through 11, or expressions such as lists, which could have another range of numbers. So if we had like a list of numbers from 1, 2, 3, 4, and all the way up till 10, because it would be inclusive in a list, if we said for num in this list, that would be equivalent to saying for num in 1.11. Similar to for loops, we can have a while loop, and this will sort of loop infinitely until some expression evaluates to false. So the syntax just goes while, and then some block, that's the expression, and we're waiting for this to evaluate to false. So while number is less than 10, currently the number is 0, we're going to execute this block of code. So in this case, we'll just print the number, and then as we went over before, we will add 1 to the number. Now, this is sort of pseudocode. The actual syntax in Rust for incrementing to a number, first of all, we have let num equals 0. So without the mutable keyword right here, we can't change this number. So that's the first thing we have to do. And then another way we could write this is num plus equals 1. So that's just a very subtle difference in terms of actual functionality in code if we were to plug this into an editor such as VS Code. So what we're doing is incrementing number by 1 until the while loop turns to false. So also in this case, we'll only be going up to 9 because it is exclusive to the number 10, since num must be less than 10, not less than or equal to 10. This accounts for while looping, for looping, and also if statements. Now we can head over to VS Code to check out some more applications of these and also the while let statement that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. So here we have our loop syntax. Now this is similar to a while loop, except we can see that we're missing sort of the expression or condition that has to evaluate to false before the loop stops. So what we're going to do here is loop through this block of code an infinite number of times until we have some condition that breaks. So this is basically Rust like syntax of saying while true, for example. So that would be the equivalent in any other language. And like we went over before, we have let mute some variable name equal to 0, meaning we can change it. And then what we're going to be doing is printing that number and then incrementing it. And then the increment can sort of act as a condition to break out of this infinite loop. And looking down further into our file, we are going to see our while let statement. So this is a little bit trickier in terms of the syntax, but it's basically a way of looping for pattern matching instead of some condition. So instead of saying until we get through this whole list, like coming up with some condition, such as while length is less than 3, for example, we could say while let sum. Now sum will just be equivalent to just saying like y, for example, except in this case, Rust, we have to specify the data type. So we can say sum y, meaning it can be any data type from this list. In terms of how we're going to be dealing with it in the block of code, we're going to pop from X until X is empty is basically what this pattern matching will do. So you're going to print Y here in this block of code until the array of numbers X is empty. And also another thing that I'd like to mention is if we didn't specify that X is mutable, meaning changeable, then when we said X.pop, Rust would throw us an error saying, oh, we can't change immutable variables if we just had let, for example. And down here, something similar to what we went over before, we are just printing a range of numbers. So we can comment this out for now. And based on our review, we can sort of guess what will happen in this main function. So let's see if our guess is correct. Okay, yeah, perfect. As we can see here, we have number 0 all the way to number 9 as we expected. And then y is equal to 3, 2, 1, since we'll be popping, which takes from the end of the list first. Okay, so that covers the basic syntax of control flow in Rust. We went over looping, for loops based on iterators, while loops based on pattern matching, and while loops based on conditions. We did find some sort of things that we haven't gone over much in depth in previous lessons, such as mutable variables and sort of ownership of data in Rust, which is what we'll be going over in the future lesson, Rust ownership. So with that in mind, good luck and happy programming.